Well, Thompsons is a trade union law firm, and we only represent injured people or victims of injustice. We never represent insurance companies or employers. We've worked with trade unions for over 95 years protecting workers' rights, and we strongly believe that unionised workplaces are safer workplaces. There's been a number of disgraceful changes brought in by this government against a background of austerity to start off with, so it would involve huge cuts of up to 50% sometimes to the health and safety executive resources, which means that there are fewer inspections of workplaces, fewer investigations and fewer prosecutions, which ultimately means that workplaces become more dangerous and employers are less accountable. We know that there's been hundreds of thousands of jobs in the public sector that have been cut in the NHS and local government, which increases the pressure on the existing staff, leading to work-related stress and other diseases. The prison population has changed so that prisoners are released with significant mental health problems, which again puts pressure on NHS staff and leads to increased numbers of assaults. The school rebuilding programme, which was due to start in 2010 and onwards, was scrapped. We know that 80% of schools have asbestos in them, and teachers, or the incidence of mesothelioma with teachers has increased over the last 10 to 15 years. There have been cuts to fire services, meaning that there's fewer firefighters, fewer fire engines. This increases the response time, which puts the public and the firefighters themselves at risk. The government has also changed how people can get compensation. They've introduced fixed costs, which means that no matter how much work it takes to try and win the case, lawyers will only be paid a fixed fee, which puts them at a distinct disadvantage to insurance companies, who can still instruct their lawyers to do however much work they need to do to defend the claim. They've introduced the Enterprise Act, which means that even if you are injured and an employer has breached health and safety regulations, you cannot rely upon those breaches when trying to prove your case and prove the negligence of the employers. And all this is against the background of this so-called compensation culture, which is in fact a myth, because the number of accident at work claims has decreased over the years. The only types of claim that has increased is the road traffic accident claims, and you'll know that if you've had a rear end shunt, the first phone call after you've rung your insurance company will be from a claims company to see if you'll make a claim, because your insurance company has paid a referral fee to that company. So the insurance companies bleat about the number of these road traffic accident claims, whereas they're the ones that are actually encouraging people to make them. The Employment Tribunal fees were introduced a number of years ago, and there's been a dramatic drop in the number of claims that have been made and brought to tribunal in the region of sort of 70 or 80% reduction. So just before Christmas, the government planned to increase the small claims limit from £1,000 to £5,000 across the board. So no matter what sort of injury it was, that was their proposal. By way of explanation, if you are injured, you are entitled to claim compensation. And that's broken down effectively into two parts. General damages, which is for the injury itself, and special damages, which is for the financial losses, usually loss of earnings, travel expenses, etc. The current position is that if the general damages part of your claim, so for the injury, the compensation for the injury, is more than £1,000, then you are entitled to claim back your lawyer's costs from the losing party, so from the employer or the insurance company. If the government's proposal to increase this to £5,000 came in, it would have effectively meant that 95% of people who are injured would not be able to claim back the costs of their lawyers' fees. And that means a number of things, that effectively people wouldn't be able to afford to instruct a lawyer, in particular low-paid workers, there would be this inequality of arms, because again the insurance companies could still instruct lawyers, and you might be faced with a situation where someone is injured, hasn't got a lawyer, and would have to represent themselves in court against some fancy lawyers that the insurance companies instructed. Or probably what would happen is that they wouldn't make a claim at all. Again, this is an attack on working people's ability to access justice, and Thompsons and trade unions and other organisations launched a campaign against these proposals as part of the consultation process, and a petition was introduced and was signed by thousands of people who recognised the injustice of what these proposals meant. I'm glad to say to a certain extent that just last week the government made an announcement to say that whilst they were going to introduce an increase to the small claims up to £5,000 for road traffic accident cases, which is still unjust to those people injured in a road traffic accident, because they may not be able to pay their mortgage or rent or provide for their family if they can't instruct a lawyer and get compensation. The government did take notice of the campaign and decided that for other injuries, so workplace injuries and injuries outside the workplace, that limit would only be increased to £2,000, which still means that a significant proportion of people will not be able to instruct a lawyer and obtain compensation probably, but certainly it should be acknowledged that the campaign that Thompsons and the trade unions and other organisations ran was successful to a certain extent. We're analysing how this is going to affect working people, but from Thompson's point of view, the fight will go on against these proposals, which were due to come in October 2018. I think that low-paid workers will be most affected and hurt by these the changes that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. That they are in the most insecure jobs, in the most dangerous workplaces generally, and we would encourage all workers to join a trade union so that hopefully the workplaces will become safer places.